What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy, the hater. And after I did my Is Triple H Racist video, I realized, and this is a shortcoming of the haters, I realized that all of this stemmed from apparently some interview or something that MVP did. Luckily, my loyal subscribers pointed this out one way or another in the comments. I had no idea. I thought it was based on that, like, you know, little press conference they did. But apparently MVP suggested that Triple H is racist, right? I don't know if this is true. I think MVP backtracked on it, right? But I wanted to make a video specifically about MVP because to me, MVP represents, I don't want to call him an abject failure because some people were like, oh, after saying this about Triple H, he's never going to be in the Hall of Fame. If MVP makes it to the Hall of Fame, you should just cancel the Hall of Fame. Like, if someone that's like a one-time U.S. champion and a persistent jobber for the vast majority of his career makes it to the Hall of Fame, then it's like everyone's going to the Hall of Fame. Like, Akira Tozawa has a better case to be in the Hall of Fame than MVP. So, you know, while I enjoyed MVP at different times of his career, let's not get ahead of ourselves. MVP is not this great missed opportunity, nor is he this great manager. He is a mid-level wrestler and a mid to below mid-level manager, right? The only purpose of the Hurt Business, and this is something that irks me beyond belief because everyone was pretending that the Hurt Business was this like excellent faction. It's a faction with Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander. Shelton Benjamin has been a jobber for like the last 25 years. Now, I love Shelton Benjamin. He's one of my personal favorites from the Ruthless Aggression era, but I'm not under any delusions that Shelton Benjamin was this excellent wrestler in terms of his presentation. He was an excellent athlete and he could do a lot of cool things, but as we've established many times here, that used to be not enough. Now, if Shelton Benjamin wrestled now, he could easily have like a Seth Rollins like role because Seth Rollins is not better on the mic than anybody, let alone Shelton Benjamin, right? Shelton Benjamin was what he was. He made his money, good for him. But let's not get it twisted. People act like the Hurt Business was like the next Ministry of Darkness. And even then, the Ministry of Darkness was full of jobbers, right? It was not this massive like four horsemen like stable. The entire stable, the entire point of it was Bobby Lashley is time to be the champion and he is going to have a gimmick built around him, right? Now, that brings me to the other point that MVP made. Oh, he was like, the gimmick of the Hurt Business was stolen and given to the Bloodline. What was the gimmick? And how is it stolen? The Bloodline's gimmick is that they're a family of Samoans who kick ass. The Hurt Business's gimmick are their four black guys who dress in suits and are all about the money. It's not the same gimmick at all. It doesn't parallel at all. The only thing they have in common is that it's four dudes and a manager, right? Which is basically every faction. That's like saying that the Final Testament is also a copy of, you know, like the Bloodline. No, it's not. It's a different stable. It's just a stable, right? The Hurt Business was nothing special. It was just a stable. Now, MVP, apparently, in this interview, he made it seem as if Triple H didn't want to bring back the Hurt Business. I completely understand. I enjoyed the Hurt Business for what it was. They were a fun thing to watch, but let's not make it seem as if the Hurt Business was this excellent faction, right? That like without them, how will Raw ever survive? They could have marketed them better. There was a lot of things they could have done with them, right? In my opinion, Bobby Lashley's title run was hindered by the presence of the Hurt Business because Bobby Lashley, before the Hurt Business, was the U.S. champion. He was presented as this dominant U.S. champion, and he was presented exactly how every U.S. champion should be presented if there's any intentions of pushing them beyond the U.S. title. And he was presented in a way where basically it's like this guy is clearly too good for the U.S. title. Now, some of my fans said Bobby Lashley is boring. And I have to agree. Of course, Bobby Lashley is boring, right? But he could have been made more exciting if he were booked a little bit better. And that's just how that is. And that's just how that's going to be. You understand what I'm saying? But with all these things in mind, right? With all these things in mind, we have to consider the reality as well. And the reality is that if someone doesn't want to bring back the Hurt Business, this doesn't mean they're a racist, right? Because the implications there are that the Hurt Business is this undeniable faction, and the only reasonable reason why someone would not want to bring it back is because they don't like black people, which is absurd, right? Because we all know, because we all saw it, that the Hurt Business isn't that great. And the Bloodline is also not that great, right? There's only a handful of factions that are done correctly. You know what I mean? Now, MVP, did he deserve more? Well, yes, I think his last run was good. It was a revitalized run, right? Because he came in as a manager with his cane. And, you know, if you pair him up with people that can't talk, he can talk better than average, right? But he's not believable as a manager because he has no success as a manager, right? And that's the thing. And I understand you have to build up to that, right? But it's not like MVP is what made Bobby Lashley that champion, right? Bobby Lashley was on his way anyways, right? You can argue that MVP, boosted up the careers of Shelton and Cedric Alexander, but I would argue otherwise. I would argue that Bobby Lashley did that too. You know what I mean? Like if they weren't associated with him, like it was just MVP and and he was just the manager of Shelton Benjamin and Cedric, right? That team wouldn't win anything, right? They would be another pair of Omases who just show up for battle royals and nobody gives a flying fuck, right? So with all this being said, the one thing that pissed me off the most was that when MVP debuted in AEW recently, and he was like, this is my client, Shelton Benjamin, it made me realize that MVP, in many ways, is part of the reason why Shelton Benjamin was held back. Because I don't know if y'all remember, but I remember that when MVP came in, he was pushed as a powerful mid-carder. And the likes of Shelton Benjamin fell down the line to make room for MVP, right? And it's like, only a dumb person would look at Shelton Benjamin and MVP and think MVP is the better one. Now, MVP also is the same age, basically, as Shelton Benjamin. And while Shelton Benjamin can still do basically everything he has always been able to do, MVP can't do anything, right? He's like a shit wrestler now. He's like basically just a manager. And there's something wrong with that. People get older and, not everyone's equally athletic. But this was also clear back in the day, right? So as far as I'm concerned, like MVP coming in as a manager is silly because MVP is still of the age where he could be a wrestler. But they chose to make him a manager. Maybe that was a better fit. But let's be real. The shtick had worn out its use. MVP had done this to no success in various other promotions, and nobody particularly gave a flying fuck about MVP, And for some reason, like a lot of other wrestlers, right, MVP has other aspirations, right? Like MVP, Swerve Strickland, they all want to do rap songs. And it's like, you're not good at this, you know what I'm saying? This is not your forte. There's some people that are good at it and some that aren't. You're one of the ones that aren't. Like if Max Caster wants to be a rapper, hey, he's got bars, he's clever, right? MVP has lines like Tropicana, I'm bringing the juice. I mean, if you want to listen to that garbage, then go ahead. But even R-Truth, at least R-Truth makes like fun songs. But you understand what I'm getting at here, right? It's like they have other aspirations, and when they fail, they have to blame somebody else. And nobody, this is what the video really is about. There's nobody that takes accountability for their failures anymore. It's like every time someone fails, it's someone else's fault, right? And I blame Dolph Ziggler for this. Maybe not the man Dolph Ziggler, but the character of Dolph Ziggler, who was this whiny brat. And obviously, if I blame Dolph Ziggler, I have to go back a little bit more and blame the likes of CM Punk, which is not even a character. CM Punk really believes that he was held back unjustifiably because of some resentment or jealousy or unreasonable hate. But the fact is, everywhere this guy goes, people don't like him. And the fact is that, in my opinion, if it weren't for Cena and the fact that Vince McMahon concocted the storyline to give him the pipe bomb moment, this guy would have become big. Nobody would have given a shit about CM Punk. He's been riding that promo for the last 15 years, and since then he's accomplished absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? So I personally took offense, not offense because that's an exaggeration, but when CM Punk was like, I don't know if people are jealous of me, nobody is jealous of CM Punk. Now, of course, CM Punk is a wealthy man, and of course, most of us don't have as much money, and we would like to have that much money. But that's about it. That's the only thing that anyone would be jealous of CM Punk for, right? He's just like a dude, he's almost 50, right? All he talks about is his dog, and his wife, and all he talks about is how he's been held back, and he's honestly been a failure at everything he's done except for wrestling. Now, even in wrestling, you could argue that he was a massive failure. He certainly was an overachiever, but when I say overachiever, I don't mean that as a good thing. I mean that as this guy should have never gotten to this level because it's not a real sport. So being an overachiever just means that you took someone else's spot. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that you were good or you deserved it. It just means you literally took someone else's spot. Whereas if someone's an overachiever in basketball, like we expect this guy, like this weekend, for example, one of my fantasy players, Alec Pierce, I put him in there because I knew he was going to have a massive game. But at the fourth quarter, he had 0 points. Then he got 20 points in 3 minutes. You know what I mean? That's being an overachiever, but he did it. He actually did it. You know what I'm saying? He caught the ball and he ran a touchdown. He had a few other receptions. He actually did it. So it's an overachiever and a real thing, and that's to be commended. But an overachiever in a sport filled with nepotism, and when I say sport, of course I don't mean a real sport, then you're not really achieving anything. So with all that being said, the likes of MVP, the likes of Dolph Ziggler, the likes of CM Punk are honestly part of this problem of this 40 to 50-year-old guys who really believe, like people in their 40s basically, who really believe that they were just as good as The Rock and Stone Cold, and then they're surprised when they don't get paid or don't do as well as The Rock or Stone Cold. And it's like, dude, the reality is, as we saw with The Rock's return, that you're not as good as The Rock, right? If you were, you would draw a few people, right? So this is, the whole thing comes full circle, cucks. You know, we have like the Obafemis of the world, the Ethan Pages of the world, you know, and they think they're big stars, I'm sure. But the reality is you can't even draw 1 million people, you know, with the support of WWE. If Obafemi and Ethan Page were in a new promotion, like if they went to TNA, they wouldn't move the needle at all, right? Just like, remember what I said about Gallows and Anderson? And when they got signed, or when FTR went to AEW, and I said, there's not one person who watches WWE that watches New Japan and doesn't know who Anderson and Gallows are. And vice versa, the same point can be made about FTR. There's not one person of the 15 people that watch AEW that is going to change the channel because FTR is there, right? These are people that already appreciate FTR, and they're just made happy maybe by FTR coming there, but they're never going to draw a dime. Same thing with Gallows and Anderson. It's like, you know, there's not one person in the globe that is a fan of Gallows and Anderson that does not already watch WWE, right? Because everyone that watches New Japan or AEW, they all watch WWE. Almost all of them. There might be a few people that are like, I can't handle it, you know, but most people, like 99%. And even of the people that don't, nobody's going to be enticed. If you're not watching WWE because you hate WWE, you're not going to watch because Gallows and Anderson decided to go there. You know what I mean? Nobody gives a shit. And that's the problem with a lot of these things, right? That's a lot of problem with a lot of people, that they do not achieve enough because they're not good enough, but then they present this shortcoming as everyone else's problem but their own. So that's all I got to say about that, cucks.